Good evening. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and welcome to Vampire Reviews. Anybody need a toothpick? What is this, a toothpick for giants? As you may recall, some 6 years ago, we discussed my top 10 list of female vampires. Many lady vampire characters have come and gone since I made that list in 2013, and if I were to remake it now, there would definitely be some changes to the rankings and which creatures of the night made the cut. But one that would absolutely still be on it was my number 3 choice, Marceline the Vampire Queen from the animated TV series Eventide. I've already gushed about how great Adventure Time was for pushing the boundaries of children's entertainment, and how refreshing it was to have a character like Marceline, when vampires for kids are so often defanged. What's with it with most media thinking that kids can't handle characters without black and white moralities? Marceline is one of the good guys in Adventure Time and friends with the series protagonists, even though she does bad, scary things sometimes.
He's right. I could have snapped and done you all in at any time.
She's 1,000 years old, so Adventure Time built up this amazing, complex lore for her, all entangled with other characters' tragic backstories. This epic animated series finally ended a little less than a year ago with its 10th season, and even though Marceline was a sporadically appearing supporting character in a sea teeming with fascinatingly weird personalities, she's a fan favorite, and we did get more of her in the years since I praised her on my top 10 list. She only shows up in like 45 of the 289 episodes, but in November of 2015, the show dropped a miniseries all about her, right smack in season 7. 8 episodes connected in one continuous story arc, which was unprecedented for the show's usual episodic format.
Making steakers, making mega steakers. Take some steakers and make a mega steaker.
This is Stakes. And it even got its own vampiric version of the opening theme song to set it apart from the regular episodes. You can watch it as its own thing if you've never seen the show before, as it sets itself up enough to make sense, in as much as things ever make sense in the trippy fever dream post-apocalyptic world that is the land of Ooh, where Adventure Time is set. But it also ties up a few key story threads from the main show as well, and has an impact on the character relationships and world building of the series going forward. In Stakes, we learn that 1,000 years ago, Marceline used to be a mortal vampire slayer whose personal mission was to rid the world of vampires. In a twist of tragic irony, she became one herself as she was killing the last vampire left. And ever since, she's been the only vampire in the world, which is what makes her the Vampire Queen by default, I guess. The miniseries starts when Marceline decides she doesn't want to be a vampire anymore.
Some bad things happened to me when I was little. When I became a vampire, I was just a messed up kid. Now it's 1,000 years later and I'm still messed up. I want to grow up.
So, she has her ex-girlfriend, Princess Bonnibel Bubblegum, perform a scientific procedure to turn her mortal again.
This tickles really bad!
Oh, I say mortal, not human, because before she became a vampire, Marceline was only half human on her mom's side, and half soul-sucking demon on her dad's.
What are you doing?
Stealing your soul.
My dad never gave me squat, just some soul-sucking skills. Remember this?
The glimpse of Marceline's human mom in the flashback sequences is one of the many great lore tidbits this miniseries delivers. Marceline's always been blue-skinned like her demon dad, but here we finally learn that her mom was a human woman of color, just like Olivia Olson, the voice actor behind Marceline. Back when I made my top 10 female vampires list, I asked where all the vampire ladies of color were, and one was with us all along. When Marceline undergoes the procedure, the souls she sucked of the 5 worst vampires from her Slayer days are set loose upon the world once more, and Marceline has to go through slaying them all over again, but with her friend's help this time. Through the process, she grows as a character, and even though she ends up a vampire again by the end, thank goodness, she is now feeling better about herself and her life choices. Unlife choices.
Now I'm a vampire with fresh mortal memories and more empathy or something. More grown up.
One thing Marceline's known for is her songs. She's a musical vampire. Playing her bass and singing along is a way to process and express her deepest feelings, despite the lyrics' usual outward simplicity. She sings a few times in stakes, but the most important song is Everything Stays.
The underside is lighter when you turn it around. Everything stays right.
Written by Rebecca Sugar, who was responsible for all of Marceline's best songs.
Everything stays right where you left it. Everything stays, but it still changes in little ways when everything stays.
The gist of Everything Stays is that when you leave something behind, it doesn't just disappear, it stays where you dropped it. But it's going to change while it's waiting there, and when you come back to find it, it will still be there, but not quite the same as it was before. And this sets up the theme for Marceline's growth in the miniseries. She ends up a vampire again at the end, just like how she was when she started. All the trapped vampire souls she expunged and tried to leave behind are back inside her again, still part of her. But like a plastic toy left out in the garden sun for too many days, these things about her have faded and changed color, and she feels that difference at the end despite her circumstances being basically the same, and she's okay with that.
I'm cool being a vampire again. Being mortal was good. At the same time, it was terrifying.
Because the vampire here represents trauma. And Marceline's ordeal with the other vampires and her own vampire nature serve as a metaphor for therapy to address that trauma. By the end, she's gone through a therapeutic process of introspection, self-examination, and growth, and has come to terms with some of her past traumatic experiences that shaped her early life and had been haunting her ever since, weighing her down, much like the trapped vampire souls she'd been carrying around inside her for 1,000 years. At the end, those vampire souls are back inside her again because, in reality, trauma isn't something that you can ever actually get rid of. It stays, but through the therapeutic process, she develops a better way of coping, and carrying that burden isn't so difficult anymore. The 5 vampires who emerged from Marceline's vampire essence sludge are all named after major arcana tarot cards, and she faces each of them in a particular order, reminiscent of how cards are laid out in a tarot reading. Tarot reading is a form of occult divination where the reader draws the cards and interprets them to answer questions about the past, present, or future for themselves or someone else. The practice is a type of fortune telling, but rather than predicting the future literally, it's more a form of introspective analysis that can help someone process and make decisions about aspects of their life. In a reading, the order in which the cards are drawn and laid out can change the way they're interpreted. And by the end of Marceline's metaphorical tarot reading, she's gained new insight on her life and made some choices about her future. The first card she draws, vampire she slays and soul sucks, is the Fool.
Pika Pop!
The Fool!
Like his tarot card equivalent, he is carefree and seems unaware of any danger around him, allowing Marceline to slay him relatively easily. He's also bearded and barefoot, like in the card's earliest iterations.
Smell my feet, Marceline. I promise you won't regret it.
The Fool card indicates the start of a journey. So it's only apt that he is the first vampire Marceline's soul sucks, and then the first she re-encounters the second time she slays them all. He represents her new beginning, setting her on the path of her emotional journey here, the same way the card depicts a protagonist of a story on the path through the Fool's journey of the Tarot Major Arcana. The next vampire is the Empress.
Surrender to the Empress Eyes.
In tarot, this card indicates femininity, beauty, nature, and nurturing, and can be connected to mother figures. The Empress is the most feminine of the 5 vampires we see, and she uses her womanly beauty to enslave Simon, the Ice King.
Hello, Simon.
Oh, lady! Hi.
Her hypnosis powers connect to how the inverted version of the card can mean dependence on others, as she has her thrall do her bidding.
How can I serve you?
Bring me blood.
But most importantly, the Empress connects to Marceline's mommy issues. Previous Adventure Time episodes get in deep to Marceline's daddy issues with her neglectful, soul-sucking demon father, but Stakes finally shows us a bit about her mother. We don't see how Marceline's mother abandoned her, whether it was willingly like her father's abandonment, or, much more likely, some tragic, unfortunate circumstance that had to do with the apocalyptic war, but losing her mom had a huge impact on Marceline's emotional state as a child. Stakes goes on to remind us of Marceline's tragic history with the Ice King. After she lost her mother, Simon found her and took her in, becoming her new nurturer, until his ice crown caused his dementia, which drove him away from Marceline, deepening her abandonment issues.
Wait, no! Wait! Ugh. Simon! Simon!
A flashback sequence shows us the day she lost him, and we learn she started slaying vampires as a way to feel close to him once he was gone.
I hunt vampires because of you!
Because of me?
That the Empress targets the person who once nurtured Marceline connects to her motherly tarot origins. Also, one of the powers Marceline gains from sucking the Empress's soul is invisibility, which is symbolic of how she tends to hide from her own emotions, at least until they all come flooding out, usually in song form.
Memories. Memories.
The third vampire Marceline and friends face is the Hierophant. 1,000 years ago, she actually slayed the Hierophant fourth, but this time, the order is altered ever so slightly, so she doesn't have the healing powers she'd gained from the previous vampire when she goes up against the Hierophant this time, and it's much more difficult. The Hierophant tarot card represents conformity and traditional belief systems, and this shape-shifting vampire is very much obsessed with the old ways.
May I come in?
Unlike the Empress's refined tastes,
The good blood with the gold leaf flaked into it.
Hierophant clings to a classical approach to being a vampire, following all the traditional vampire rules and weaknesses.
You're one of those old-fashioned revenants, aren't you? You can't come in unless I invite you in.
Surely diverging from the old ways is what made us vulnerable the first time.
Even though Marceline isn't able to slay him herself this time, his inability to adapt is what leads to his downfall.
I wasn't invited. No!
His presence in Marceline's metaphorical tarot reading here is to make her think about and challenge her status quo. Even though she wanted to have everything vampire about her removed, she's found herself repeating her past, reabsorbing the vampire souls, but this time, with reflection and analysis, she can challenge her status quo and reshape her future approach to vampireness. The fourth vampire is the Moon. Her tarot card equivalent represents fear, anxiety, the subconscious, repressed emotion, inner confusion. If this card is laid out in your tarot reading, basically you probably need to go to therapy. Like the classic depiction of the card, the moon drops pearls of dew in her path. And she's also the most frightening of all the vampires Marceline faces, going from serene and mysterious to scary as shit.
What do we do?
Her vampire healing powers are also symbolic of therapy. By defeating the moon, Marceline gains the ability to heal her physical wounds, similar to how this metaphorical tarot process is helping her heal her inner demons. The moon card reveals that you can't change the past, but you can learn to deal with it. And when the moon is laid out after the Empress in a tarot reading, we can interpret it to be connected to Marceline dealing with the trauma of losing her mother at a young age. Also, the fact that the moon and the Hierophant switch places in Marceline's second time along this fool's path on the tarot journey indicates the result of dealing with healing while still having to process how her experience as a vampire differs from the status quo, compared to how her non-vampire friends process trauma, finding her own way to heal. It takes her a little time to figure this out though, and she temporarily gives up the fight before the last vampire, leaving her friends to battle him without her.
Jeez Louise, trying to fix it? Trying to fix me? Just made things 1,000 times worse.
Therapy is hard. Opening up old wounds in order to heal them is hard. And sometimes things feel worse before they get better. It's only when Marceline's second nurturer figure, Simon the Ice King, returns and talks about avoiding challenges that she gains the perspective she needs to push through the process to its completion. Empress, Hierophant, Moon. Even though Simon inadvertently gives her the encouragement, she's not slaying vampires for him anymore. Now, she's doing this for herself, to become the kind of person she wants to be. The last vampire is the Vampire King. In the past, he bit Marceline just as she staked him, turning her into the new last vampire as a way to preserve his vampire legacy beyond his death. There is no King Tarot card, but the Vampire King mentions 2 cards by name.
Returning you would subjugate me to the wheel of fortune. And I am a king, not a hamster. My path runs straight into the void on a sick, flaming chariot!
The Wheel of Fortune card depicts several animals: a snake, an eagle, an ox, and a lion, and the Vampire King's body is a combination of these. The Wheel of Fortune represents change, cycles, and destiny. The king was the one who changed Marceline into a vampire, and the second time she fights him, he talks to her about repeating cycles.
Our lives are magnetized. We're in a negative loop. What's the one thing you've noticed about the world since you beat me all those hundreds of years ago?
Everything repeats over and over again. No one learns anything, because no one lives long enough to see the pattern, I guess.
But you've lived long enough, and you still think this is the right way?
Harkening back to the Everything Stays song from the start of the miniseries. However, the king actually wants to break the cycle, believing being a vampire isn't the right way to exist in this new world.
In this age, why would I want to be the Vampire King anymore?
I don't know. Why would you?
I wouldn't.
But Marceline is too hyper-focused on staking him at first to listen, to think. The Chariot card, meanwhile, represents decision-making, control, and action, and when it's combined with the Wheel of Fortune, it connects to Marceline's need to find a way to control her destiny. And the Moon card coming directly before these cards represents her fear of being driven by past experiences that traumatized her and set her on her inevitable path. The anxiety that all things are meant to be, cannot be changed no matter how hard we try. The king convinces her to remove his vampire essence instead of killing him, and for a moment, it seems like Marceline's found a way to break the cycle and change her destiny, to eliminate all the vampires without becoming one again herself. But then, the king's vampire essence sludge takes off as a cloud monster of unstoppable evil, and that's when Marceline has her moment of despair, as she realizes that it's impossible to avoid her destiny. Everything stays. The Wheel of Fortune always comes full circle. She cannot catch the reins of her chariot, and Marceline's fool's path is going to continue no matter what.
Anyway, you don't want in on this fight. This one's a loser.
But what she learns is that it's not really about destiny. It's that everything we do leads us to who we've become. We can't undo our past. If we did, we wouldn't be the same person, wouldn't be ourselves. The 5 vampire souls inside her make up part of Marcy, not just her cool vampire powers, but herself as a person. She's back to where she started at the end because that's the only way she can be. Except this time, she's got a support network and her friends helping her slay her demons, and that's significant. And after she gains her introspective awareness, she realizes that what she can change is how she copes with her path, how she processes her traumatic past, and a new way to accept and appreciate her vampire nature going forward.
Now I'm a vampire with fresh mortal memories and more grown up.
Everything stays, yes, but it also changes, ever so slightly.
Daily and nightly, in little ways.
And one of the things that's changed for Marcy is her outlook on the future. She's realized she wants to spend forever with Princess Bubblegum. While she was temporarily mortal, Marceline had a dream of growing old and dying, while Bonnie, who is an immortal sentient piece of bubblegum, stayed nice and pink.
You think I'm nice?
But now that Marceline's a vampire again?
Bonnie, thank you for helping me grow up. Now I guess we get to hang out together forever.
And this future relationship was confirmed in the Adventure Time series finale 3 years later. When Bonnie's hurt in the war, Marceline becomes the Vampire King's essence cloud monster, using the epitome of her vampireness in order to save her.
What?
Even back when we weren't talking, I was so afraid something bad would happen to you and I wouldn't be there to protect you, and I don't want to lose you again.
It is Marceline's vampire nature that ultimately allows her to be with the one she loves in the way she wants to be. And her journey of growth in stakes is what brings Marcy to the place where she can understand and accept that about herself.
Maybe it's love?
The vampire tarot therapeutic process she undergoes in stakes doesn't just cement her as a vampire and therefore conveniently immortal again, but more importantly, it teaches Marceline how to cope with her past trauma. Specifically, her abandonment issues, which were a huge part of what drove a wedge in her relationship with Bonnie for so long before they could come back together.
I thought that if I shut everything out and just focused on work, it would all be okay. And look where that landed me. I pushed you away.
And when Adventure Time ended after 10 long seasons, Marcy and Bonnie finally got their happily ever after, vampires and all. Whether you use tarot or a therapist or any other form of self-analysis to approach your healing process, to battle your inner demons, remember, it won't magically eliminate the monsters from your past that dwell inside you. They cannot simply be staked away.
Are you like in my head now or what?
For now.
The vampire souls Marceline sucked are still within her, making up who she is. She'll always carry them along with her past. But the therapeutic process will absolutely help you learn how to build your future around them in a positive way. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and those are stakes worth fighting for.
Let's go in the garden. You'll find something waiting right there where you left it, lying upside down. When you finally find it, you'll see how it's faded.
You are welcome that I did not make a whole lot of horrible steak puns. I'm not saying I didn't make any, but not a lot, so you're welcome. And thank you, because this episode was supported by my Patreon patrons, and if you would like to help me make more vampire reviews and endure more vampire puns in general, consider supporting my Patreon. You can pay $2 a month and get early access to all of my videos a couple days before they come out to the public. So if you enjoy watching these, just check out my Patreon. Like, comment, subscribe. Am I saying all the things I'm supposed to say, YouTube? Just kidding. Also, my book is out in audio, which I mentioned before, but look what I've got now. I actually have the audiobook. This is the CD version. It's a 9 CD set, narrated by Tracy Odom, The Company of Death by Elisa Hansen, my zombie vampire apocalypse book starring the Grim Reaper as a major character. And you can buy this on Audible, use your Audible credits, or you can get the audiobook from any of your preferred audiobook downloaders if you're not an Audible user. You can get the paperback book, hardback, on any online bookseller, and you can get the Kindle book on Amazon. Thank you again. Good night.